Hi everyone, I'm your storyteller. I'm here to help you relax today. I know many of you watch this video to help you sleep. So, before you drift off, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you from and what time is it where you are right now? Now, get comfy and chill out. It starts with the cold. It always begins with the cold. Not touching anything, but just knowing it's coming. A sneaky chill that slides through my bedroom walls. At exactly 3:06 in the morning, it feels like winter air hitting warm skin. I've learned to spot the signs now. This has been happening for 3 weeks straight. The house sounds different right before it happens, like something heavy is moving around upstairs. The heating system also switches off right on time, leaving only the quiet buzz of the city outside my window. Then it hits. 3:07. The finger taps a finger touches my shoulder blade. It's cold, like morning frost. It presses just enough so I feel it, but light enough to make me wonder if I'm dreaming. Tonight, like every night for 21 days in a row, I count the taps. 1, 2, 3. Each tap lasts exactly 1.2 seconds, with 0.8 seconds between them. I know this because I've actually timed it. My job listening. My name is Marcus. I've spent 15 years listening for sounds that most people can't hear. I mostly work in a studio, picking out tiny noises, like the soft scrape of a bow on violin, strings, or the little breath a singer takes before they sing. I even notice how a room's sound changes when someone walks in. My ears are like special tools, trained to hear very quiet things that people usually miss. When this started, I treated it like any other sound I needed to understand. I wrote everything down carefully and tried to stay logical, not jump to conclusions. The stuck clock my watch on the nightstand always shows 3:07. The hands are frozen there. It's not broken, just stuck. The second hand shakes a bit, like it's trying to move but can't. It never goes forward. I've changed the battery 4 times. I've taken it to 3 different repair shops. Everyone tells me the same thing. It's perfect. The battery is full. It works exactly like it should. But every morning, it's stuck at 3:07. And every evening, it starts working normally again. My special gear, I move my hand across the bed to my recording equipment. I have a special microphone, a Numano 67, and a recorder, a Zoom F810. Both are worth more than most cars. If something is touching me, these machines will record it. They record everything else. The neighbor's cat walking on the roof, the fridge turning on 2 rooms away, even my own heartbeat through the bed springs. After the 3rd tap, the finger lifts away. I hit record without even thinking, just from doing it so many times late. At night, the green light on the recorder glows, showing it's capturing top quality sound. If there's anything here to find, my setup will catch it. A feeling in the room. But as I lie still after 3:07, another feeling creeps in. It's something beyond what microphones can pick up. A presence that seems to fill the empty space in my room, like a person-shaped hole in the air. I can feel it watching me. Not with eyes, but with something deeper. Something that knows my thoughts before I even think them. This feeling started with the finger taps, but it's gotten stronger every night. More intense. Sometimes I hold my breath, scared that even my breathing will show too much to whatever is in my room. Other times, I breathe on purpose. Like I'm performing for an invisible audience that listens to every breath I take. Analyzing the sounds. I can't sleep after 3:07. I've learned this the hard way. So, I use the hours until morning to study the recordings. My home studio is in the extra bedroom. I've spent a lot of money on it to make it sound perfect. Here, surrounded by my sound gear, I check each night's recording very carefully. The first week, I heard nothing weird. Just normal room sounds, a little street noise, and me moving in bed. But starting on the 8th night, I noticed small changes in the background sound. Tiny shifts in air pressure that only showed up when I made the sound much louder. At first, I thought it was just electric interference, or the house settling. But then I found something that made my skin tingle. Breathing, not my own. I was holding my breath during these parts, trying not to mess up the recording. This breathing was different, deeper, slower. It matched my normal breathing rhythm so well that I didn't notice it at first. Mirroring my breath only when I looked at the sound waves side by side, did I see how perfectly they matched. When I breathed faster, the unknown breathing followed. Within half a second, when I held my breath, it stopped. When I started breathing again, it started again. Something was breathing with me, perfectly copying my body's rhythm. I spent the next few nights trying different things. I changed my breathing patterns, held my breath for a long time, and even breathed really fast. Each time, the other breathing changed to match mine. If I breathed fast, it breathed fast. If I breathed slowly, it slowed down with me. They were almost perfectly in sync. Beyond explanation, it's technically impossible, which should have made me feel better. Maybe I was hearing things, or it was just stress from not sleeping. But the recordings don't lie. Digital sound at this level shows what's really there, not just what I think is there. Whatever was breathing with me was actually moving air, making real pressure changes that my equipment could measure. I started adding more recording gear, 3 more microphones around the room to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. I even borrowed a heat camera and electric field detectors. If something was in my room, I wanted to record everything about it. The unseen presence, the results, were crazy. The breathing always came from the same spot, about 3 feet to the right of my bed, at chest height, like something was standing perfectly still there. The heat camera showed no warmth. The electric detectors found nothing weird, but the sound evidence stayed the same. Breathing that matched mine exactly, caught by 4 different microphones. I started charting the breathing patterns over many nights, hoping to find something that would explain it. Instead, I found something even more disturbing. The matching was getting better. What started as a rough copy had become perfectly in sync, not just the rhythm, but how deep the breaths were, how long I breathed in, even the tiny pause between breathing out and breathing in again. Whatever was breathing with me was learning my body's exact patterns, getting more and more accurate. A battle for control sleep became a fight. Every night at 3:07, I would lie still while something studied the most personal parts of me, the automatic things my body does to stay alive. My breathing felt exposed, like someone was reading my personal diary. The finger taps suddenly meant more. 3 taps, always 3, like a hello or a sign that the watching time was starting. I began to tap back on the mattress, trying to create a simple way to talk. When I tapped twice, the breathing would change a bit, becoming more purposeful. When I tapped 4 times, it would stop for exactly as long as my tapping, then start. Again, this back and forth scared me more than just being watched. It meant there was a mind, an intention. It could understand and react. Whatever was in my room at 3:07 a.m. wasn't just recording my breathing. It was talking to me. The breakthrough thought about going to a hotel, just to break the pattern. But my curiosity as a sound engineer won out. This was a mystery that people in my field dream of finding. I was documenting something new, maybe even something that could change how we understand things. The scientific importance alone was worth the scary feelings. The 20th night brought a big discovery that totally shattered my logical thinking. I was lying on my side instead of my back, trying to change how I breathed, to see how the presence would react. At 3:07, the familiar finger tapped 3 times. But this time, I felt the cold touch through my shirt, directly on my skin. The touch lasted longer, almost 2 seconds, and it seemed to pulse with a rhythm I knew but couldn't place at first. Then I understood. The pulsing matched my heartbeat. The breathing matching was creepy enough, but this was a deeper level of monitoring. My heart rate, the most basic rhythm of my life, was somehow being picked up and copied through that single touch. I lay perfectly still, scared to move, scared to even think, while something methodically listed all the main functions of my living. Body. My voice, not mine. The recording from that night showed even more unsettling details. Underneath the matching breathing, almost hidden, I heard a third sound, faint but clear, a rhythmic thumping at 72 beats per minute. My resting heart rate. 3 parts of my body were now being watched and copied. Breathing, heartbeat, and even my brain waves. When I focused on math problems, the breathing became more regular. When my mind wandered to feelings, the rhythm became more natural, more human. Something that shouldn't exist was studying me like a scientist. Confrontation on the 21st night. I planned a bolder experiment. Instead of just watching, I would try to make direct contact. I got a flashlight, a voice recorder, and lots of coffee, to stay super alert after 3:07. When the finger touched my shoulder, I would sit up, turn on the light, and try to see whatever was in my room. The cold feeling arrived on time at 3:06. That familiar chill that made me nervous. I counted down the seconds. Ready? 3:07 arrived like the sunrise. The finger touched my shoulder. 1, 2, 3. I shot up and turned on the flashlight in one quick movement, shining the light where the breathing always came from. The light showed nothing but empty air and the far wall. But the cold hadn't left my shoulder. If anything, it got colder, spreading down my arm like quick frostbite. I pointed the voice recorder at the empty space and asked out loud what it wanted, why it was here, and what it was learning from its nightly visits. My words landed in a silence so deep I could hear my own blood moving in my veins. Even the city noise outside seemed quiet, like the world had stopped to listen. Then, through my studio monitors in the next room, I heard something that made my logical mind break down. It was my own voice, speaking the same questions I had just asked, but with small differences in how it sounded. The words were the same, but the way they were said was wrong, too careful, too deliberate. Like someone reading lines from a script they didn't really get. The voice was coming from the empty space 3 feet to my right, exactly where the breathing always was. I played the recording back right away, my hands shaking. My original questions were there, clear as day, but the answers, my own voice answering back, were missing from the recording. The audio only showed my questions, followed by silence, like I was talking to myself in an empty room. Yet, I had heard the answers perfectly clearly. My voice, my words, but spoken by something else. Losing my mind, or something else. The cold finally left my shoulder, as the first light of dawn showed at my window. My watch on the nightstand started, working normally again, with a soft tick that sounded super loud, after hours of unnatural quiet. After hours of supernatural silence, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the recording equipment that had failed to catch the most important sound event of my career. Either I was losing my mind in a very specific way, having hallucinations that perfectly matched my job skills but left my technical knowledge intact, or something impossible was studying me, using methods that couldn't be recorded. Both ideas scared me equally. As daylight got stronger and the normal sounds of morning traffic came through my windows, I found myself listening to my own breathing in a new way. Every breath in felt watched, every breath out analyzed and filed away by something that had learned to perfectly copy the most basic actions of my life. What happens when it's done learning? Tonight is the 22nd night. I'm writing this while it's still daytime, while I can still think clearly without that heavy presence that shows up at 3:07. In a few hours, I'll go back to my bed, set up my recording gear, and wait for the familiar cold to announce another session of being watched. But I'm starting to think that whatever visits me isn't just learning how to copy my body's functions. It's learning how to be me. The matching isn't just watching, it's getting ready. The question that keeps me awake, even during the day, is simple. What happens when it's finished learning? My watch on my desk shows 2:47 p.m., ticking normally. In 12 hours and 20 minutes, I'll find out if I'm losing my mind or losing something much more important. Something that breathes when I breathe, beats when my heart beats, and speaks with my voice when no one should be listening. Something that knows me better than I know myself. Something that might be getting ready to prove it. A strange GPS glitch though. First time my phone's GPS told me to turn into a dead-end alley, I just thought it was a mistake. You know how technology can be. Phones mess up. Internet servers crash. Even satellites can lose their signals sometimes. It's just part of my job as an IT consultant. But then, the voice on my phone, that clear, mechanical voice, said for the third time that I had reached my destination. I was staring at nothing but some plants growing wild on a wall and a rusty metal sign that read, "Come back tomorrow." Right then, a cold feeling settled in my chest, like a stone dropping into still water dark behind me. The old Kappa Sigma house loomed. It was a really old, Victorian-style house, covered in shadows that seemed to sway with the evening wind. A peculiar place to stay. I had said yes to staying overnight at this house, but I wasn't thrilled about it. My meeting with a client ran super late. All the hotels nearby were full because of some big event, like a homecoming weekend. My contact had promised me that the old college fraternity house still had rooms for people visiting the university. What he didn't tell me was how the building felt. It was like it was breathing out decades of old secrets through its worn-out wooden walls. I held my phone and checked the address again, making sure every number matched the email I had. The phone screen showed the address with total confidence, 1247 Elm Street. And this was 1247 Elm Street. But this narrow path between buildings, barely wide enough for one person, couldn't possibly be a house. It was just shadows, thick and dark, like spilled black syrup between brick walls. The mysterious sign, the metal sign, hung right at my eye level, from a single rusty chain that made a soft clinking noise in the breeze. The letters on it had been pressed in a factory a long, long time ago, but the weather had eaten away at the edges, making the words a bit blurry, like looking through old, wavy glass. Come back tomorrow. It didn't say closed or no entry. It felt like an invitation. But for later, a promise put off. I slowly backed out of the alley. I felt like unseen eyes were watching me move, making the little hairs on my arms stand up. The street stretched out empty both ways. Old maple trees lined the road, their branches so thick that they blocked most of the streetlights, making pale dancing patches of light on the ground. My rental car was exactly where I'd parked it, but something felt off about how it was sitting. Not quite the angle I remembered, maybe a few inches closer to the curb. The old fraternity house, the Kappa Sigma house, took up the whole corner lot, looking like a grumpy old man. Its 3 floors of bay windows and fancy trim created complicated shadows that moved with every puff of wind. A porch wrapped around the first floor, with empty pots on its railing that might have held flowers once, but now only had dry leaves and spider webs. The front door, a huge oak door with colorful glass in it, was slightly open. It let out a warm, yellow light onto the porch. Marcus Hendricks, the university's building manager, had met me there an hour earlier. He had a sorry smile and a ring of keys that jingled like wind chimes. The house was used for overflow guests, like visiting professors. He'd explained. He led me through rooms that smelled of old wood, polish and years of pipe smoke. My room was on the 2nd floor, a simple bedroom with 1 bed, a desk for writing, and a window that looked out onto the very street where my GPS had 3 times tried to send me nowhere. The house that talks, just so you know, Marcus had mentioned, showing me how to use the old-fashioned heater. The building settles at night. Old houses, you know, the wood gets bigger and smaller. You might hear some creaking, especially around midnight when it gets colder. I had nodded and thanked him. I was used to old buildings being a bit quirky from all my trips for work, but wood settling doesn't usually sound like footsteps. It doesn't stop at regular times, as if someone is testing each floorboard to see if it's strong, and it certainly doesn't seem to respond to your movements. Getting louder when you shift in bed, and going quiet when you hold your breath and listen. The first night, I blamed the sounds on just normal old house noises. Pipes expanding, wood bending, mice in the walls. But by the second night, the creaking had a rhythm. A clear, slow beat that felt like it had a purpose, not just random physics. It started exactly at 11:47 p.m., according to the red numbers on my bedside clock. It began with a long, drawn-out groan that seemed to come from somewhere below my room. Not the basement. I'd walked through the basement when I arrived, but from some space between floors, as if the sound was coming from inside the walls themselves. The alley on the map tonight was my 3rd evening in the house. I found myself checking the time constantly as the minutes slowly crept toward midnight. My client meeting had gone well that afternoon. My work was done, with handshakes and signed papers. I should have been packing, getting ready for my early flight home tomorrow. Instead, I sat at the writing desk, my laptop closed, staring at my phone's GPS app with a growing sense of unease. The map on my phone was perfectly clear, showing every building, every address. But when I traced the path from the Kappa Sigma house to 1247 Elm Street, the blue line led right to that narrow alley, that impossible dead end with its strange metal sign. According to the satellite pictures on my phone, the alley didn't even exist. That spot looked like the solid brick sidewall of the building next door, going straight up from the sidewalk to the roof without any breaks. The alley disappears and reappears. I had visited the alley again that afternoon, this time walking instead of driving. The narrow path was exactly as I'd found it. Ivy-covered walls, scattered leaves, the rusty sign hanging by its lonely chain. But when I held up my phone to take a picture of the spot, the camera only showed the plain brick wall I'd seen in the satellite view. The screen showed no alley, no sign, no dark shadows. It was just a blank wall. My phone's clock read 11:45 p.m. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, looking down at the street below. Elm Street stretched out in both directions, empty except for the yellowish light from the old lampposts. The alley, if it was real, if my eyes weren't making up what my phone's camera couldn't see, was just out of my sight, hidden behind the huge trunk of a massive oak tree. 11:46 p.m. The waiting felt like bugs crawling under my skin. I pressed my hands against the cool window glass, watching my breath fog up the surface in small, uneven clouds. Somewhere downstairs in the house, a door softly closed, followed by the faint sound of footsteps on carpet. Another guest, maybe, or the night security guard Marcus had mentioned. The sounds were comforting because they were human, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this giant old house. The growing sounds, 11:47 p.m. The creaking began, not the random pops and groans of wood changing with temperature, but something much more deliberate. A long, drawn-out groan of wood under heavy pressure, like a giant door being opened incredibly slowly. The sound seemed to rise from under the floorboards, filling the room until the very air vibrated with the wood's complaint. I stepped back from the window, my heart beating fast like a trapped bird. The creaking continued, and now another sound joined it. Metal against metal, the terrible squeal of hinges that hadn't seen oil in decades. But this house had no basement door, no huge entrance that could make such noises. I had explored every room I could get to, every hallway and staircase. The building's design held no secrets, no hidden rooms or forgotten paths. The sounds reached their loudest point, then started to fade, leaving behind a silence so deep it felt heavy. But underneath that silence, barely heard yet definitely there, came the whisper of footsteps on what sounded like gravel, or maybe dry leaves, or maybe something else entirely. Investigating the alley again, grabbed my jacket and headed for the front door. The main entrance area was dark, except for one table lamp that cast shaky shadows across the old furniture. My footsteps echoed on the wooden floors, even though I tried to be quiet. Each floorboard gave away my movement with tiny complaints that sounded strangely loud in the quiet of midnight. The front door was exactly as Marcus had left it, locked, but not bolted, easy enough to open from the inside. The October air bit at my skin as I stepped onto the porch, carrying the smell of rotting leaves and something else, something metallic and cold that made my nose ache. The street stretched out in both directions, empty and patient, waiting for something that might never come. I walked toward the corner where Elm Street met Maple, my footsteps muffled by the thick layer of fallen leaves on the sidewalk. The alley should be visible from this angle, tucked between the old pharmacy building and what looked like an empty office. But when I reached the intersection and turned to look back, I only saw the unbroken brick wall, with windows dark like empty eye sockets, yet I could feel it, the pull of that narrow path, the certainty that it existed despite my eyes saying otherwise. The scratched message. I walked back the way I came, slowly along the building's edge, running my hands along the brick wall until my fingers found the space between buildings, the gap that shouldn't be there, but was. The alley opened up before me, darker than the surrounding shadows, as if it sucked in light instead of just blocking it. The metal sign hung still now, its message unchanged. Come back tomorrow. But underneath the pressed letters, barely visible in the pale streetlight, extra words had been scratched into the metal with something sharp. Fresh scratches, their edges still bright where the tool had scraped away the rust. The door waits below. I backed away from the alley, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps that fogged the air like little ghosts. The scratched words hadn't been there during my earlier visits. I was sure of it. Someone had added them recently. Maybe tonight. Maybe while I sat in my room listening to the impossible sounds of a door that couldn't possibly exist. A house of secrets, though. Walk back to the Kappa Sigma house felt longer than it should have, as if the street was stretching out like soft candy beneath my feet. Every shadow seemed to move when I wasn't looking right at it. Every rustling leaf suggested movement that had nothing to do with the wind. The house welcomed me back with its warm light and familiar creaks. But even its supposed comfort felt wrong now, tainted by the knowledge that somewhere beneath my feet, something was waiting. I climbed the stairs to my room, each step making sounds that seemed to echo far longer than they should. The hallway stretched ahead of me, lined with doors to empty rooms that I had never bothered to look inside. Behind each door could be anything: more guest rooms, storage spaces, or passages that led to places not marked on any building blueprint. The source shifts back in my room. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone. The GPS app still insisted that 1247 Elm Street was a real place. Still drew its confident blue line from where I was to that impossible alley. But now, when I zoomed in on the satellite view, I could see something I'd missed before. A faint dip in the ground where the alley should be. A subtle shadow that suggested depth rather than flat ground, as if something lay under the street. Something big enough to create a hollow space in the earth above it. 11:47 p.m. was approaching again, and I realized with growing fear that the sounds I'd been hearing weren't coming from below at all. They were coming from above, from somewhere beyond the ceiling, from a space that, according to the house's layout, shouldn't exist. Marcus had explained that the third floor only had storage areas and a small attic. Nothing big enough to hold whatever was making these sounds. Footsteps above the creaking started again. and this time I could follow its path across the ceiling. Slow, deliberate movement from one side of the room to the other, as if something huge was being dragged across. Wooden planks. The sound of those old hinges followed, metal screaming against metal, protesting the movement. And then, clear as a whisper in my ear, came the sound of footsteps on gravel. But I was on the second floor. There was no gravel above me, no path where those footsteps could fall. Yet the sound continued, getting closer until it seemed the walker must be standing directly overhead, separated from me by only a few inches of plaster and wood. I grabbed my laptop bag and headed for the door, my hands shaking as I turned the handle. The hallway beyond was perfectly silent, empty and waiting. But as I stepped into the corridor, I heard another sound, the soft whisper of an opening door somewhere in the house below. Someone was entering the building, or something was leaving it. Leaving this place, I went down the stairs as quietly as I could, wincing at every creak that gave away my movement. The lobby stretched out before me, lit by the same pale light that had greeted me when I came back from the street. But now the front door stood wide open, gently swinging in the night breeze, letting the autumn air flow across the wooden floors. I approached the doorway carefully, peering out into the darkness. The street looked empty, but the feeling of being watched pressed against my skin like cold fingers. Somewhere in the distance, barely heard over the whisper of wind through dead leaves, came the sound of footsteps on gravel, getting fainter. With each passing second, I pulled the door closed and locked it, then went back to my room to pack whatever was happening in this place. Whether it was something supernatural or a clever trick played on my mind, I'd had enough. Morning couldn't come soon enough, and with it, my flight home to a world where GPS systems didn't lie and doors didn't open onto impossible spaces. The call of the alley, but as I folded clothes into my suitcase, I found myself checking the window again and again, drawn to scan the street below for any signs of movement. The alley remained invisible from this angle, hidden behind the oak tree's massive trunk, but I could feel its presence, like a strong magnet. Whatever lay beneath that narrow path, whatever door waited in the darkness under the street, it knew I was here. It had been calling to me through the wooden voice of this old house, pulling me closer with each night. The scratched words on the metal sign echoed in my memory. The door waits below. But what door? And what was beyond it? I closed the suitcase and sat on the bed, staring at my phone's GPS app. The blue line still stretched from where I was to 1247 Elm Street, still insisting that the alley was a real place worth going to. Now, as I watched, the line began to pulse softly, like a heartbeat, like something alive and patient, and totally sure that sooner or later, I would follow it home. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow, I will leave this place behind. I'll go back to my life of computers and networks and problems that can be solved with logic and technical skills. Tomorrow, I'll be somewhere else, somewhere safe, somewhere that doors don't creak open onto impossible spaces, and GPS systems don't guide travelers to places that exist only in the gaps between what's real and what's possible. But tonight, as the clock again neared 11:47, and the familiar sounds began, their wooden symphony above me, I couldn't help but wonder,